Hi, my name is Vanessa Vallely and I'm CEO of We Are the City. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to this interview Phillippa Prongué from LinkCity. She's the CEO, and I'll give you a little bit more background. She's Managing Director. She oversees the strategic direction to ensure the delivery of their pipeline. Phillippa, known as Pip, is a qualified chartered surveyor. She has worked and led teams in the real estate sector for over 2 decades, delivering projects within the residential, industrial, leisure, student, office and mixed-use sectors. In her role as CEO at LinkCity, she draws upon her experience in acquiring, financing and exiting multi-million-pound real estate schemes. So Pip, welcome.
Hello, thank you. I feel quite old now, 20 years of working.
Not at all. So this is a great interview, obviously, for our community that are in real estate and property, because we're going to go behind the scenes with your career and find out kind of how you carved out such a successful journey. But we want to start with a little bit about your background. So tell us, where did you grow up? What school did you go to?
Okay, well, yeah, I've got 2 sisters, one of whom is a twin sister, so I actually have an identical twin, and actually grew up in Bromley in Kent, and my father actually is a chartered surveyor as well. So we were brought up very much in the property community, so to speak, extending, all the what was it called, the estate agent sevens that used to happen, or rugby sevens. It was always great fun. So schooling wise, went to a nice local school called Stratford House, and then went on to rugby school where I boarded, and then from there went on to actually the Royal Agricultural College in Cirencester, where I read rural land management. But actually it was quite naughty really, because it was a degree from Reading, but I actually went to Cirencester and had a great time for 3 years.
Reading is where most kind of property gurus come from, isn't it? It is the university of choice for anyone like in the real estate sector.
Well, that's it. And I think because Dad did it, I think me and my twin sister thought it'd be fun to go and do rural surveying for 3 years rather than just do the urban land management. So yeah,
your sister does the same thing as well.
Well, both my sisters did actually. So all 3 of us qualified as chartered surveyors, but I'm the only one left working as a surveyor.
Okay. And did your mum do something completely different?
Yeah, teacher. Most upset that none of us followed her.
Oh, I'm not surprised. So obviously you always envisioned a role in the property sector because of that background. It's amazing, isn't it, how that parental influence kind of plays down the line and shapes what your career will be.
Yeah, well, I think...
Sorry, go on.
This because it was always so much fun, because Dad did retail development, and he built things like the, what was it called, Meadow Hall Shopping Centre. And so all our holidays were spent going up there, having holidays up in the Yorkshire Dales and things, and then he did the Metro Centre. So all our holidays were via A, B and C, and in the good old days when you presented, you had slideshows, and we used to have to go out, and Mum used to have to photograph us with all our coats on and off, so Dad could prove why you should have a shopping centre rather than going into the high streets, etc. We used to have all the slides stacked up at home, so it was good fun, and as you say, we were just brought up by it, and you would go and meet him for lunch. And back then there was a Chicago pizza pie factory in Hanover Square, and I thought I quite fancied that as a career. So that's how we ended up doing it, really, all of us.
So you started life as a chartered surveyor. Talk to me about the journey. Where's all the different places that you've worked?
Yeah, well, relatively few actually. So it started doing retail agency for a really small company called Havells, which actually was probably the best place to learn, because there was only me and a couple of other people. You were thrown in at the deep end. So whereas lots of people on their graduate schemes were never allowed to host a client meeting, etc., where I was, it was you or no one. So you got thrown straight in at the deep end and off you went. And I was given a couple of small retail parks that I was in charge of letting. And it was actually through that I made my next move actually. So I was a retail agent on the Crown Hill retail park in Plymouth. And Nigel Turner was my client at the time, who started out at Lang, that Keir then bought Lang. And it's a funny story really, because one day I was walking on Regent Street and we were outside the Key Cutters, and I bumped into Nigel and I said to him, "Oh, I didn't realise Kate was leaving." And he said, yeah. Do you know of anybody who wants a job? I said, "Well, not really." And he said, "Well, what about you?" I said, "Oh, well, I don't know really. let me come in and talk to you. So really it was from that I ended up moving and then going client side. So I probably moved there 2 years post qualification and then went and worked client side at Kier. And again, quite a small team when I started. And back then we were split kind of into sectors. So I kind of sat in the industrial team, albeit from my retail background. We were then sent off and Nigel just said, right, go and find a site. So off I went. And the first site I bought there was a scheme on the North Circular Road. And it was Shadbolt, which was a wood veneering factory. And bought that and then changed it into a car showroom and a self-storage operator. But Nigel was great in that respect because, again, he was very much the throw you in the deep end, give you enough rope and you hang yourself. So he was never into micromanagement. So it really gave you the opportunity to grow. And I think he mastered the art of giving you the guidelines within which to operate, but not telling you how to get there.
Yeah, sounds like a great leader. There's so much in there. There's like the serendipity of bumping into someone you know, which very much plays along to a number of different things that we talk about around how important your network is, because it is, isn't it? That's kind of what leads to jobs and things like that. Absolutely. But then also how you thrive under the right leader.
Yes.
So the fact that I too have had a boss that was a little bit like that just threw me in and just see if I swam. Yeah. But also knowing that he'd be there to kind of pull me out if I started to drown a little bit. So it's so important. Do you think you've taken some of that leadership into your own leadership style? Yeah, absolutely. I'm, very much learned from him that, you employ people because you think, they can do their job and they're good at it, and therefore leave them to get on with it. So I do really try to empower people to, think for themselves and path their own way. And everybody has a different way of doing things. And sometimes other people's ways are better than yours, or they might be better suited to that way of working. But as long as they get to the end result, it doesn't bother me how they get there. Yeah. And I don't want to micromanage someone to tell them how to do it, because we all have such different ways of learning. Absolutely. And I think also being a mother as well has helped me, because I've got 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and they are totally different in terms of their approach to learning and work ethic and everything else. So I think also that helps you realise how different people are in terms of their learning when you're watching somebody else trying to learn, and different ways of how they get to the same point. Are the kids going into property? That's the burning question. Well, they're only 14 and 13, but my son is undecided, but my little girl does. She's always fascinated, and she was telling me yesterday that she did something at school about architecture. So I think she's more interested in architecture, interior design side of things. But yeah, they're definitely interested in what I do. Yeah. Amazing. What a legacy that goes down the line in terms of like career choices. So we talked a little bit about leadership. What other lessons have you learned kind of along the way? When you look back, what do you say, oh God, I wish I knew then what I kind of know now? What would they be? Well, firstly, I would say never assume you'll be rewarded for good work. And I think lots of people, and probably more women than men, assume that they will be rewarded for doing something well. And you learn the hard way, no, you won't be rewarded. You have to put yourself out there and put your head above the parapet and use that awful word, I. And I suppose I was always I still am very inclusive and like to talk about my team, etc. But I think when you work in a environment which is all men and it's very much thou that shouts the loudest, you have to be able to speak up and defend yourself. And I think from my perspective, I was very lucky because Nigel was a fantastic sponsor and pushed me up through the business. And I think the other thing is men who have daughters are very different as well in how they treat women in the workplace. But still don't assume that you will be promoted. And I think the other lesson I've learned is about definitely asking for pay rises, etc. Because again, men do it all the time. I mean, not all men, but most men. And if you don't ask, you just don't get. And I think it came to a head. And I think, one thing I suppose if you want to know biggest disappointment, and this is going to sound a bit crass because it is ultimately about money, but when I was at Kier and I made it up to be MD, I was MD of the South and somebody else was MD of the North. And by mistake, the FD sent out a document which disclosed our pay. Oh. And we're not normally on the list, the top people. And it transpired that I was paid
an awful lot less than the men. And bearing in mind, well, I brought more money into the business, etc. Also, I was MD in the South, so in theory, one should have a London weighting, etc. And we're talking like £30,000 difference in pay, so not a small amount. But, you know, when you sit down to start talking about it, you know, the stuff that comes out, well, you know, they've got more experience, oh, they're older than you. And I said, no, wait a minute. You've always said, if you're good enough, you're old enough. So that's bollocks. Secondly, if, you know, the experience and stuff. So in the end, let me get this right. If I made no money, I only employed 2 people and didn't have a team of 15, I wasn't collaborative, then I'd be paid the same. And eventually they were, oh, okay, we'll sort it. And I think, you know, you do have to look after yourself because nobody else is going to. And I think it's those conversations that happen in the background that you're unaware of. And you don't like to think that somebody said, oh, well, don't worry about it, so I'll never know and won't ask. And one likes to think it's an unconscious bias that's happened, but you just don't know. So, you know, just make sure you look after number one because nobody else will.
Absolutely, and challenge it. I do think, though, it's quite hard to do that when you're younger. I mean, I remember I had a job as a business manager and they'd hired a grad in. Obviously, I didn't go to uni or college or anything like that, but they'd hired a grad in. And I get there's a grad kind of increase for salary because you've been to university, but we were doing exactly the same job. If anything, I had a little bit more experience and I found that there was a 20k pay gap between he and I. But at the time, I was too junior to mention it. You know, I didn't want to say anything. I did throw it in when I resigned.
Yeah.
But, you know, because I was on safe ground. But those pay gaps are there, aren't they? I mean, there's much more transparency around salary now. I mean, back in my day, it was a sackable offence to discuss salary for that exact reason. They wanted to kind of keep it under the carpet.
Yeah.
So what happens if you're not senior? How would you approach that? Because it is you've got to find
really difficult
for your balls to do that, right?
Yeah, really, really difficult. And I think, yeah, you have to present it in a way where you keep emotion out of it, which is one hard part. And then the second bit is never accept the word only, because you hear a lot, oh, well, it's only £2,000. It's like, well, if it's only £2,000, then you pay it out of your pocket. And it's a really difficult one, but you do have to go in and keep emotion out of it and try and factualize it in, you know, what you've achieved and what you've done, which is totally unfair because I bet no one else has had to do the same, but unfortunately you have to. But you can't use the word it's unfair. You have to be quite, this is what I've achieved and this is what I deserve, and try and do it that way.
I think there's also sometimes, you know, be grateful for what you're given. I mean, I remember sitting in meetings where it was like a 1k or a 2k pay rise and I was like, oh, thank you very much. Like that was like the crown jewels when I'd absolutely worked my backside off, you know, for the best part of the year. Or the old chestnut about the share price. Yeah, well, you know, the share price and we don't have enough money. And I'm like, actually, yes, you do. So ladies, if you're taking anything away by watching this, know your worth.
Absolutely.
Right? Be prepared to challenge. You've heard it here from Pip as well. So you talked about sponsorship earlier on, which is a big kind of thing of mine, you know, because I think that's what really shifts the needle for women in organisations, to be under the wings of, you know, somebody that can open up doors of opportunity for them and someone that uses their own reputational capital to elevate others. Yeah. So you spoke about the gentleman earlier on. Was there anyone else that kind of sponsored you along the way?
Yes, there was. Well, I'd say Nigel was very much my sponsor at Keir, so that was good there. And then what I then had was a mentor as well, who actually turned out to be the non-executive Keir at the time, called Kirsty Bashford. And she too was brilliant. And I think what she brought me was that bit about worth and, you know, never accepting the word only, and trying to really help you to take a step back on yourself and the helicopter, the career. Because I think the other thing is along the way is, if you're kind of a happy person, you're always quite chatty and everything else. You know, when I used to get in the lift with the chief exec, hi, how was your weekend? Chat. But I didn't have my elevator pitch, you know, and all that kind of stuff. I couldn't give you 2 minutes on why I was superb. And of course, I had it all somewhere in the brain, but it wasn't at the front to come out instantly somebody asked. And what she really did was help me to do that step back. And how do you sell yourself in 2 minutes flat? And to really think about, I suppose, polishing you offer as a person. And that, I don't mean that in terms of necessarily how you give a presentation or how you write a report, but how to think of yourself as a commodity in the workplace and for your career, which was really helpful actually. And I think also there's a downside of having stayed at a business so long, because I was at Kier, over 15 years. So therefore your external exposure in terms of moving in the workplace, because I'd never had to see a recruiter, because I'd never moved jobs. And in fact, because as you say, my second job came from Nigel. So I'd never, ever had to go out and look for a job and have a CV and all that type of stuff. So I think it's helping you then realise how you have to make the most of all of those external opportunities. And if you Googled yourself, when do you come up, and so all that type of thing. And I think you mentioned it earlier as well about the network. And I think that's another really hard thing to do, especially in property. It's got better now, but when I started in property, every Friday and Thursday was spent at the pub.
Yeah.
And it was the blokes ringing up, do you fancy coming for a pint? But as a woman, to bring up a man and say, hi, do you fancy coming for a drink? It's just awkward, and you don't do it. And I was lucky because at rugby, I was outnumbered 3-1 men to women. At Cirencester, I was outnumbered 3-1 as well. So I was quite good at talking to men and being in the crowd. And, as the blokes at the office used to say, well, you're fine because you're one of the boys. But I was able to, and let's be honest, I probably can drink quite a bit as well. So I was okay at going out to the pub, but lots of women don't want to do that. And it's really difficult. And it has got less and less now, but I would say you really do have to put yourself out there. And you can have a breakfast, you can have a coffee, you can have a lunch. There are lots of other ways to go out and network, but you have to make sure that you make time for that as you work your way up through a business. And as you say, that doesn't mean you as age 25 have to go and network with a director or chief exec, but you have to kind of peer match along the way, and you grow with other people. But really, really doing your network is probably the most important thing, which is probably also one of the hardest things, especially if you're not an extrovert. And then once you have kids as well, and you've got all the pressures, like I used to do the 7 a.m. till 4 bit at work for about 6 months. So therefore going out after work was difficult. So it's just trying to balance that all up. It gets more challenging, but you do have to make time for it.
Absolutely. I mean, now it's a lot different. I totally relate. My days in banking, everything was done at the pub. Didn't have time to go out to kind of any networking events when the kids were young. I mean, now there is a plethora of different events that women can attend and stuff like that. And like there's women in property, isn't there? There's women in construction. There's all these groups now that are incredible. And for those of you watching, go and have a look at our directory. There's a few on there. And you can find them on Twitter. Just groups of women that are there to support and help you build your network as well. But as Pip said, making sure that you make the effort and that you find the time, I think is really important. So tell me a little bit about LinkCity. What you up to there? Obviously COO, you're overseeing all these incredible kind of projects. Tell me a little bit more.
Yeah, well, it's great actually. So we are the development arm of Bouygues, and we have bags of cash to spend, which is great. And it's lovely working in an environment where you have that balance sheet behind you. And we are known very much as the construction arm of doing quite big, complicated projects and really great integrated hospitals, and you name it, we can do it, build bridges, tunnels, etc. But what we're trying to do is to grow the variety of the development work that we do. And historically, we've done a lot of PFI, so project finance initiatives, and lots of DBFOs, so design, build, finance, operate. So these projects that take, a good year and a half to procure, then probably another year to get on site at least. So what we are trying to do now is expand out to get smaller schemes, quicker schemes to site, a bit more bread and butter projects really, and also to give our team more opportunity to grow as well, to give younger members of staff a project of their own that they can get their teeth into. So we're looking to grow and expand. And at the moment, we do mainly residential. So we do a lot of build to rent, private resi, student accommodation. So look to expand out into different sectors as well, whilst very much using the expertise that the Bouygues group can bring as well. Because Bouygues itself is, in every country pretty much, we operate telecoms, we operate TV networks, everything else. So there's a whole host of stuff out there. But for me, I want to keep my team interested rather than them going off to some other places in the world. I want them to stay within my team. So there's a great team here. And I think the one thing that Bouygues really has embedded is its culture. And when I joined, you very much hear about the Bouygues family, which is great actually. And you can tell people genuinely believe it. And the lovely thing is actually here, for the first time ever, I actually have a female boss as well, which is excellent. So Fabienne is the UK chair. So she obviously is very pro women in the workplace. Albeit I don't think we probably need to say that anymore. But you know, it's great to be led by a woman for the first time in my entire life. But no, so here it's a great team, and as you say, we're looking to grow. We've got three big regeneration projects on at the moment. One over in Canning Town, which is called the Hallsville Quarter. We're on site with phase 3, delivering some more housing there. We've just completed on a big project up in Carrick Yard, which is delivering both private for sale units and then a big affordable block as well. But the lovely thing about that project is that it's tenure blind. So if you rocked up now, you would have no idea which was the affordable and which was the private for sale. So it's a really great scheme. And then we're just about to start on site with a massive regeneration project down on the Old Kent Road called the Tustin Estate. So we've got some really big, exciting projects that we're working on, as well as lots of other things which are, you know, coming to fruition as we speak.
So, I mean, I'm sure in your tenure, you've seen the conversation around sustainability change.
Yeah.
Obviously, forefront of you guys' minds. How are you addressing that?
Yeah, very much so. Well, in several ways, actually. I think we're lucky as well because we can rely on the expertise of the group. So the last month, I've been out to Zurich to meet my counterparts there and over to France. So trying to take the best practice from Europe as well and to bring that over here. But it really is in every way how we can build more sustainably, looking at the materials we use. We're also trying to look at, you know, various modern methods of construction as well and how that can help deliver, but, you know, ground source heat pumps, all that sort of stuff as well. We've just got the patent and operating a business in Norway that does wind farms which float. I'm sure that's not the technical term, but anyhow, floating wind farms. So, you know, as a group, we've got loads of stuff we can bring in. But I think at the moment, with inflation where it is, and the market where it is, it's that really tricky balance that we've got at the moment of we can't have everything. And the way costs are, people don't want to pay any more for said houses or affordable housing. You know, land prices at the moment haven't dropped. So it's how we balance what needs to be delivered, because by the time you add in, you know, your Section 106, your SIL payments, your 278 agreements, everything else, it's how we can make this sustainable part of the, I suppose, the fabric of what we do, and in how we source all our materials as well to bring all those things together.
It's a tricky balance.
Yeah, really tricky.
You mentioned earlier on about having a female boss.
Yeah.
Now, my observations of the property sector, and I did do a little stint at a firm called Grimley JRE back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think also I'd done a little temp job. It was for British Airport Authority, that obviously own loads of different properties. But even then, it was exceptionally male dominated. You know, if there was any women around, they weren't the quantity surveyors or anyone like that. We were all the kind of support staff. You know, has that changed, and are we seeing more kind of diversity in the property sector? So where are we opening up doors of opportunity for perhaps those who come from a background a bit like I do, that didn't go to university, or, you know, what's kind of in place for those individuals that want to get into the sector?
Difficult. I think, no, I don't think it has got any better, if I'm brutally honest with you, in terms of the number of women. I think other diversity I'll come on to, but if we just focus on women for the time being, you know, we're still only at about 22% of women in board positions as a whole in the sector, which is really low. Senior leadership, I think the latest stat is still only about 30%. So we are desperately outnumbered. But, you know, I think back to my university course where there were about 60 blokes and 4 women, one of whom was my twin sister and me. So actually, probably as a stat, once you get to, at my age, at my level, that is probably about right, because there are no more women in the sector of, I suppose, that experience. But it's bringing the youngsters in and up. And I think as you say, one of the biggest deterrents is probably the lack of role models in the first place. So when people are interviewed, they're interviewed by 3 men, and therefore they think, I'm not sure I want to work here. So it's how we get the visibility lower down and into schools. And it was quite funny, actually, because at my kids' prep school, they asked for, careers for parents to come in. So I, was like, hey, I wrote down everything that I did. And I didn't get asked. So maybe I thought maybe all the other parents are astronauts or something. But I think there's still this misconception that they think we're all builders and we're out on site at 7 a.m. And I think it's exposing the myriad of opportunities that there are within property and what that offers out. But we were talking here that as a sector as a whole, most of our building sites are down 20 to 30% of the workforce. So right now it's attracting anybody into the industry, not just women at all. It's getting anyone to come and work in property. But innovation, I think, will help lead that way, because, do you want to come and work on a building site and be up at 7 a.m. in the cold rain in December, or do you want a nice tech job? So it's how we build and on the excitement of the roles that we can offer within real estate lower down. And I think at the moment, innovation is having to come about out of necessity, because there is nothing else. If there isn't the workforce, you've got to come up with different ways of doing things. So I think that, so I've just waffled on here, but there are several kind of answers to your question. I think firstly, as a leader in property, as a woman, I have to go out and sell the profession to people and prove that there are chances for women. And then, secondly, then it's the industry as a whole that needs to go out and advertise the scope of works that are here for people and what can be done. And as you say, whether it be planning, whether it be an architect, whether it be a civil engineer, the range of jobs on offer is huge. Yeah. Really, really big. But it's how we sell the excitement of it. And I think as an industry, we're very insular, because lots of people only really come into property if somebody in their family has done it. When you said to people when you're younger, I'm off to be a surveyor, they assume you're off to measure something. It's like, no, I'm not measuring anything. So it's how you sell what that means as a profession. Yeah. I think is what we need to do.
And I think you're right, the role model piece is so important, which is why one of the reasons we're doing this today, because somebody might be watching and think, oh, actually, I'd like a career in property, or actually there are women at the top, and they've been successful. So, it's that inspiration that we absolutely need.
And it is, because I'm passionate about it. And I think the lovely thing about what we do is it's different every day. So, what we build might be the same. We're still building a block of flats, or we might be building a retail unit or whatever, but everything about it is different. Every site's different. What hurdles you're going to overcome on each site. One project in Hounslow, you're suddenly having to deal with 70 market traders, and you just the whole scope of what you do with every project is so interesting. And you get an insight into everybody else's industry. If you're building an office, you get to know what happens in the DNA of the company for whom you're building. And the same with retail, you have to get into the minds of what that company does for its, who's it selling to, who are its customers, what sort of journey do they want. So you get to understand a bit about everything, which makes it really interesting.
Yeah, I find buildings fascinating, and architecture. Whenever a new building goes up in Liverpool Street, I'm like, I watch it grow over the years, like on the, the months, and I'm just like, wow, it just like I just love getting inside of buildings. I think it's fascinating. So what about diversity in the sector? Because again, when I look at it, it's not just men, it's, it's individuals who are white. How do we attract more different people from different backgrounds to the sector? Is there any work being done there?
Yes, there is. There's an awful lot. I mean, at Care 2 and here, there's a lot of diversity inclusion. We spend a lot of time going around schools as part of our CSR initiative. We sponsor quite a lot of inner city schools where we go in and talk to them about our profession. So we very much target where we go and talk about what we do to try and bring people in. And then for the people that are already here, it's to trying to be all inclusive in terms of how we operate as a business as well. So I think here more than ever, I think is very good in its inclusivity in terms of the number of people here, even in terms of nationalities. I think there's something like 70 nationalities that work here in London. So I think, again, it's about the role models. Yeah. I have to confess that, there are probably not many senior people of any form of diversity, and it's how we can do that and attract people to then stay in their profession and work their way up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about building that pipeline, because you can't magic people out of thin air. And obviously, if you're working in the schools and that, hopefully you're attracting the right talent, and more importantly, supporting them as they go through that journey as well. So if you could change one thing about the property sector that you think would excel the careers of women, what would it be?
It would be the visibility of the roles on offer and the role models. And I think it's advertising outside of the industry as well. If you're Joe Blogs on the street, you're not going to pick up Property Week and have a read of it. So it's how we do that. And I think the other big thing I would try to do as well, and I don't know how we do it, is to remove the unconscious bias that exists as well.
Yeah.
And I know that's a really hard nut to crack. And I think we did a lot of work on it at Kier about about unconscious bias and people not realizing.
Yeah,
it's how we break down that barrier as well.
I think it's hard because it just becomes systemic, doesn't it? Because people hire in their own shadows, they and then you just see the same kind of people coming through. So anyone that is watching that would consider, is thinking, oh, I'd quite like a career in property, where do they begin?
Good question. Where do they begin? I would say firstly is finding out the roles which are on offer, really deep diving into what the profession can bring, what roles are there, and reach out, drop people like me an email, or try and get involved in a network where you can go and see and make the most of the universities which are out there, and properly talking to people about what's on offer and what that means for a career path afterwards. And it is hard, because what are the roles, where are they, is a really hard thing for people to find out. And it's difficult when you just follow your father into a profession, isn't it? But I would say very much just try and dig around a bit and just find out what's out there. And I hope no one from the RICS is listening, but I think they need to probably improve their act slightly and make us out to be a slightly younger, more innovative profession, rather than being all men in suits. So I think
they are listening, because it's those industry bodies that can drive change.
Yeah, we don't do a good job, as you say, at the whole promotion of the industry as a profession. So I think it's trying to seek out at school from the careers advice, what's out there. But think about it. Next time you're in a shop, or you're in an office, or you're at the supermarket, just think about, how did that supermarket get there? And does that spark any interest at all in you? And if it does, then it's something you need to try and get a job in.
And I suppose there's so many transferable skills, right? If you've run projects, if you've run programs, if you know how to run a project, you know how to run a program. It's not hard to shift across to a different industry. Eventually, you start with something small and you build it up, which is the way it goes, right?
Yeah, because that's as in development. Most of us are, we train as development managers, which we manage a system. So, as you say, I appoint an architect, a planner, an engineer, all the people that I need, a QS and EA. So, I don't have to know everything, but I have to know how to manage a team and how to run a project, and most importantly, how to stick to a budget and hopefully get something built on time.
Ever the challenge. So to finish off, what's next for you, Pip?
Good question. Right now it's to make a success here and to grow the property element here, and to build it up to be a consistent deliverer of kind of profit and cash. I think because the hardest part in development is the lumpiness of the profits. So schemes take 3-4 years to materialize, so therefore to have enough that you can consistently deliver. So definitely, that's my short-term challenge. And in the long term, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure. I love property, and I had a very brief stint at Kier when I got promoted into the centre and doing the strategy and corporate development and everything else, which, don't get me wrong, I loved. And in terms of insight into how to run a large corporate, it was really interesting and really fascinating, but it did take me away from my love of property. So, for me, if I can continue to run a property business, I will be very happy.
Fantastic. It's been great talking to you and so insightful into the world of property. You know, long may it change, you know, as we go forward. And again, having access to role models like yourself will hopefully shape the industry and encourage others to step up and kind of tell their story too.
Yeah, I hope so. And as I say, just, you know, make a nuisance of yourself. You know, as you say, if you want to get on in life, you know, I used to, every time, you know, somebody was going to a meeting that looked interesting, you know, can I come? You put your hand up and I'll come. And the same with, you know, board meeting, the minute one was finished, I'll, you know, go, how did it go? And I think, you know, just be interested in things. And, you know, people love that. Yeah. So, you know, that would be my advice. And just reach out. People are always happy to help. And I think the one lovely thing about this industry is everybody is so friendly and they are genuinely nice people. So if you reach out and ask, people will be there to help you.
Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you very much for joining us. I know how busy you are and that we hope to see you in the future. So if any of you that are watching want to connect with Pip, you can find her on LinkedIn. Do go and find out a little bit more about LinkCity. I'm sure, you know, a property block will be popping up near you at some point. They seem to be on a mission throughout London, and it's great to see the regeneration going on in East London as well, obviously over Canning Town and stuff like that. So do keep in touch, but I hope you've enjoyed this interview, and thanks once again, Pip. It's been awesome.
That's no problem. Thanks.